Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin here again for another episode of Overrated, Underrated. We've got Michelle here behind the camera who's going to be calling out a bunch of different things, and I'm going to give my take on it in as brief as possible. So let's get started.
Okay, Justin. Tutoring, overrated or underrated?
Tutoring is very dependent, obviously, on the tutor, but generally speaking, and especially as an industry, I'd say is grossly overrated because it can lead to dependency. It can lead to a lot of people spoon feeding. Tutoring is completely unregulated as well as an industry. And I know for a fact, being in the industry for so many years, there's a lot of ethical gray lines there. So yeah, I'd say generally speaking, overrated. If you need tutoring, there's probably another issue. And if you don't need tutoring, why are you going to tutoring?
Multiple choice exams.
Multiple choice exams are probably overrated. Multiple choice exams came about because in the 70s we required an increase in standardization of collecting data, and that was just like the best way that we could collect that data, and that's how it became so like universal everywhere. But no one really thinks that multiple choice exams are a great way of really testing people, so it's actually phasing out as well in a lot of places.
Practice exams?
Practice exams are probably slightly underrated. I know that people love doing practice exams and people do them often and they probably abuse them a little bit too much. But in terms of just the cognitive benefit that practice exams have, it's really good, it's really beneficial. In fact, I think people are really underutilizing the value that they could get from it.
Online classes?
Online classes are the way that it's executed by most places who don't know how to run online classes properly. It would be like probably properly rated and that people hate them, and they probably should hate them because it's probably terrible. But if it's done well, online classes I think are very underrated because it increases accessibility, increases flexibility, it increases the ability for the learner to exercise self-regulation. So those are all positives.
Gap years.
Gap years are completely underrated. I think personally, I'm of the view that gap years should be the norm. I think people after high school should do a gap year just as a default. But I also know that's probably never gonna happen because of Asia.
Grades.
Grades are super overrated. People tie their self-worth to it. And this is coming from someone that actually, like I make a living from teaching people to get better grades. And I would say that when you're fixing on grades as your outcome, and that's what is like the most important to you, and that's like conditional for you to feel good about yourself. I mean, that's just like nothing about that is healthy or productive or even leads to success long term. So grades overrated.
Studying abroad.
Studying abroad. I'd say studying abroad is ever so slightly a smidgen overrated. It can be really beneficial, and I have spent some amount of time, studying in other countries. It's not necessary for everyone. I think sometimes people think about studying abroad like they think about travel, like it's like this magical thing that you just have to do, and if you don't do it, you're like living an inferior quality life. But I don't think that's true. I don't think everyone needs it. I don't think everyone will find it beneficial. I think for some people, they may prefer not to have that. So to each their own, but as a concept, I think it's a little overhyped. Scheduling is overrated. Scheduling is important. You should be able to do good basic scheduling following some very basic good principles that will help you to keep on track and have decent time management. But people think about scheduling as if it's going to be the thing that saves their life. If you've got decent enough, just very basic scheduling, and you still have problems, more scheduling or better scheduling is probably not going to help you. It's going to be another kind of issue, which is a whole other topic around time management versus task management. But overall, scheduling is a little overhyped.
Goal setting.
Goal setting is, this is hard to answer because it really depends on the way that you set your goals. Proper goal setting is very underrated. But it's also quite rare for people to do proper goal setting. So I know the framework of like SMART goal setting, which is really famous that people tend to use. SMART goal setting is actually a very narrow way of viewing your goals, and the thing that it really misses is whether there is long-term value alignment with it. It's great for making a goal specific enough that you can like hit it, but it's not a great way of understanding whether that was the right goal to achieve in the first place, which is the very critical missing piece. And so there are other things like reverse goal setting. Some people say smarter goal setting. And there's other frameworks that you can look up. I can go into it if you want me to, leave a comment. But overall, I'd say the way that most people do goal setting is probably a little overrated.
So we're going to go into the next section, study techniques. Interleaving.
Interleaving is super underrated. Now, in the research space, interleaving is probably also underrated, but the thing is that in the mainstream space, a lot of people don't even know what interleaving is. Most people aren't using it, so I don't know if you can even say it's underrated or overrated. I think the people that know it and use it correctly understand how powerful it is, and the people that don't know it, if you don't know it, definitely check it out. I've got other videos and stuff talking about this as well. If you want me to go more in depth about interleaving, again, let me know in the comments, but overall, interleaving, way underrated.
Active recall.
Active recall in itself is, I'd say, properly rated. Active recall is an effective way of testing yourself in general because it's forcing you to do retrieval rather than, just free retrieval or uncued retrieval, which in itself is useful. The problem is the way that active recall is used is often paired with only lower order retrieval techniques, which in itself is overrated. So flashcards is a lower order only retrieval technique, and then that's super overrated. But active recall in itself is a concept that's properly rated. There's good evidence behind that.
The Leitner System.
The Leitner System is, I'll say, a little overrated. I would say when it was first conceived of, it would have been very smart. But I think it's a little bit oversimplified, and again, it's purely a lower order organizational thing. If you don't know what the Leitner System is, just do a quick Google search on it. But the other thing is that the Leitner System was not even created by, it wasn't created by a researcher, it wasn't created by a scientist, it wasn't even created by like a practitioner, like it was created by a journalist. Like the Leitner, the original dude, I can't remember his full name, but he wasn't, like someone that was really like that heavily deep into it. He just happened to write this book that became popular. So the Leitner System is useful, but actually, to be totally honest, I think there are algorithms in the modern day that are actually much more sophisticated than the Leitner System is anyway. So in the modern day, I don't think there's any need for the Leitner System, even though lots of other systems are based on it.
Method of Loci.
Method of Loci is, so I actually teach Method of Loci, or at least an adaptation of the Method of Loci. And I think it's overrated. And I teach it very, very, very late in my program because there's two things. Number one, if you learn the Method of Loci system, it allows you to memorize a lot of content, but the content is often not very practically useful. First of all, you're memorizing it only for lower order needs, so you can only use it for like basic recall. And the other thing is that you're not able to encode a lot of information on a diverse range of topics for a long period of time because it relies on you having these kind of like distinct palaces or loci. And then they start overlapping and it gets even more confusing. So it's a great, almost like a party trick, or it's really good for very specific instances when adopted in the right way. But generally, I think, especially like memory champions that are like, oh, this is gonna change your life. Like if you learn this technique, you're gonna be able to like smash through your studies and ace it. That's just completely not like supported and frankly, I think irresponsible. So from that view, I think Method of Loci is probably overrated.
Chunking.
Chunking is severely underrated, both in the practice space and in the research space. I think there's a lot more that should be done in the research space around chunking. It's had this kind of dead zone in cognitive science for like the last 15 years, honestly. Nothing really too substantial has happened with it, but the research is very, very promising. The idea of chunking has significant benefits on your memory. In practice, I see that when you teach people to chunk effectively, it's very, very, very effective. Most people don't know how to do chunking properly. Most people don't know what chunking is. And so as a result, I'd say it's very, very underrated.
Mind mapping.
Mind mapping is underrated. And I say this knowing how popular mind mapping is as a technique. Mind mapping is underrated because people see the technique of mind mapping as like the solution in itself, rather than the type of thinking that it's meant to get you to engage in. But people do the technique without engaging in the right process cognitively. And what we know from the research is that it doesn't matter what way you write your notes, if you're not doing the right process cognitively, none of the note-taking techniques actually matter. So it's a great technique that can springboard you into the mid to higher levels of learning and to improve your self-regulation. But if you're not actually doing that, then it's not gonna have any effect. So you've got lots of people that have used it and then they don't find it effective and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. But then it's like, well, it's because you didn't use the right thinking to pair with that. So generally speaking, underrated. So that's it for this episode of Overrated, Underrated. If there's anything that I mentioned that you want me to dive into in more detail, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what it is that you want me to dive into, and also specify the question about what aspect of it you want me to dive into. In the very, very first Overrated, Underrated video that we did for this, I just said leave a comment below on what you want me to expand on, and people just said like the word expand on it, and I was like, what about it? So that was my fault this time. Be a little bit more specific, but anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this stuff, leave a like, leave a comment, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.